Pasta 101, featuring Arcobaleno pasta sheeter. Really awesome product. Really insane. The mechanics of it, the sheer, the metal, the weight, just how it produces. I mean, we were using a small tabletop model for the first 6 years I think Osteria was open. When we switched to this one, we do twice the volume in half the amount of time, and what it can do, not only just pasta, we do a lot of stuff with it. We do puff pastry through it, we do laminated doughs, we do some breads through it. You can really turn this in from not just the pasta machine, but you can really do a ton of stuff through this piece right here. And this is, I believe, the smallest of the tabletop models. They have ones that can produce hundreds of pounds of dough a day. But for what we use on a day-to-day, this is perfect. So I think I'm actually the only one that's actually doing a sheeter today, which is cool because you can start out using some fresh pasta dough, and then you'll get to see some of the extruded stuff. So basically what we do on a day-to-day, we probably do go through about 3 or 4 kilos of dough per day, all different shapes. But what I'm going to do today is something that I really like because it's classic, it's simple, and the best part about it is it uses up a lot of your scraps and things that you wouldn't normally think about using. But we're going to be doing an agnolotti classico, where we take leftover salumi scraps, leftover braised meats, leftover mortadella, leftover pretty much anything that you have that you've been accumulating all week, save it up, grind it back up together, put it in a bag, and then you have pasta. So this particular one, like I said, it's called agnolotti. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's little envelopes, and in this filling we have braised pork shank, mortadella, some beef tongue, some capon meat, and some cotechino. All stuff that we saved all week, and we utilize it, and it turns out to be something pretty nice. It's really important to keep it the perfect amount of flour. Too much, it's going to dry it out. Not enough, it's going to stick to the machine. Anything extra on the table, and I'm the first one to admit, when I roll pasta, I get flour anyway. I apologize afterwards, but in the meantime, just roll it. So, little circles out to the edges, smoothing it out. Anything that's a little rough or anything is going to get caught in the machine, it's going to tear it. It really is terrible when you're in the middle of a huge roll out of pasta and it gets stuck. And a little note, whenever you're rolling out pasta, take off your watch or your rings, because that sucks too when you rip your own. Nobody does it. Cheat a little bit here. The machine's a tiny bit different than our setup. I'll get the same. It's also really important to apply tension the whole time you're doing this, because if not, you're not going to stretch your dough as much as you'd like to. And you're also not going to be able to have, it's going to want to get stuck in the machine too. So right here I can see the grains of the table through the dough. That's kind of where I want to take it. So I'm going to trim it like this, just so I can know where my halfway mark is. This room is actually really nice and cool, so it helps the pasta stay moist, which is what you're looking for. So from here, you want to cut this into long strips. Normally we have like this accordion looking cutter that's got 6 wheels on it. It makes it real easy, but you can do it just as easy with one of these guys. It's got a fluid cutter on one side, a straight cutter on the other side. You can do pretty much all your pasta. So from here, I got 4 strips. And we'll go back and trim these up after to make it look all pretty, but for now, this is perfect. You always want to give yourself a little extra dough, because if you don't have enough, especially with this rollout, you'll fold it over and you'll realize it's not covered, which is not a good thing. So spray a little water now. That ensures that it stays moist throughout the rollout. And all we're going to do here is we're going to take little little meatballs. And that's all we're really doing. Place it at the bottom. You want to go about a finger length apart. And it's important to think about the little details and you kind of get your own little tricks and personal ways of rolling out when you do it enough. And one thing I realize is, I'm not the tallest guy. So if I don't pipe this one first and I start here, by the time I get up here, I'm smashing all my rollouts because I'm leaning over the table. So I start high and work my way low. And this is something that I think once you get the hang of it, you really fall in love with it. It's a little frustrating at first because it's very alien to do something like this if you've never worked with doughs before. But once you get the hang of it, it's something that you want to do with your friends. You want to do at home. You want to learn new shapes. You want to learn new sauces, and it's just something, like I said, the more you do it, the more you fall in love with it. And I think all the chefs and guys that work the pasta can vouch for that. So the spacing on this is important as well. You want to go a little bit wider than a finger length apart. And I'll show you when I roll it over, I'll show you why. And maybe it's just me, but I'm one of those pasta guys that I don't think when you're doing hand rolled pasta, every one of them should look identical. I think that the little differences is what makes pasta unique. I think if they all look the same, you might as well just buy something from the store. The little creases and the little bit of difference is what makes it kind of beautiful. Now that we're here, I'm going to trim up a little bit. And all this stuff, I'll throw out. You can't really roll this back into any kind of ravioli or agnolotti or anything like that, but you can save it and make lasagna sheets out of it. You can save it and make fettuccine or anything like that. There's nothing that's filled because it has little creases in it. Take it, just keep it wrapped up a little bit, come back and use it. Don't throw out anything. Alright, so from here, we're going to do the first little roll, and it's like a half roll. You just want to get that meat kind of curled over, not all the way. We're going to come back and do the other side. So now I got like half it done. I'm going to come back and kind of tuck it under as I roll. What you're looking for is that this top piece of dough is tucked underneath the meat so that it's not escaping when you actually close it. When we do this one at the restaurant, my table is probably 4 times the length of this, so we have like 12-foot rollouts of this, and you just have to fly, because if not, your pasta starts to dry out. So from here, this is when we actually shape it. So what we do is, we take our fingers and we pinch on one side of the meat, and then we kind of shimmy the air out in between. If you don't get that air in between the raviolis out, they're going to pop when you're in the water. Exactly, somebody said a brick. So right now, you kind of pinch in between them. You want to get that air out. If you see like close and see all that air that's in there, I'm kind of like massaging it out. So we got a bench knife, bench scraper, something like that.
I know what this work is firsthand.
I'm going to go finish pinching the rest of these after, but I know you guys want to see the kind of the finished product. So from here, you're going to trim off the edge. And then when you put your finger on top of the filling, you kind of pull back a little bit and cut right next to it. Come back, trim the top up a little bit. Make sure whatever surface you're putting this on is nice and flat, or else they're going to stick to that. And we, any pasta like this, we freeze all this stuff all the time. So, and then what you're left with is these little envelopes. And you took a lot of time to make these nice, so you don't want to just throw them onto the sheet tray and kind of crush them. This shape's a little resilient. A lot of the ones that we do, they'll break if you put them on the sheet tray wrong. There you have it. That's the first part of the product.
Hey Brad,
Sir.
could there be some adjustments to a dough recipe to get the ravioli to hold up better in the freezer?
There's a million things you can do with doughs. Everybody's got their own kind of way. We found through, I guess, I don't even want to call it, I don't even want to take responsibility for it or credit, but Italians, they use a ton of egg yolks, and the fat and the proteins that are found in the yolks kind of hold up better for longer under freezer conditions. And I don't know if it's something that I'm sure they just came to find through trial and error, but it's one of those things that, you know, we only use yolks in our dough. For about a kilo of flour, we use anywhere between 38 and 40 yolks. That's why you have that bright color. In Italy, they actually use these eggs. The yolks are almost red. They're fire like orange, and their dough over there is like so vibrant. It's beautiful. But I'm sorry, what's your name?
Chuck.
Chuck. So what Chuck asked is, what can you do to kind of make sure it holds up a little better? The best answer I can say for that is you have to play around with your own dough, your own environment, what you're looking for, your style of rolling out. Like I said, we roll out pasta a lot thinner than a lot of places, so our pasta doesn't last too long under freezer conditions because they start to crack and break. The good thing is we sell so much pasta that we never really have that problem. We're running out of pasta more than having a surplus. So, the best answer to that is kind of don't sandbag it. Kind of roll out as much pasta as you think you need, and a little bit extra, and then you shouldn't have any problems about storage.
Do you have a standard flour mixture you use? Assimilated, durum, and double zero?
It depends on the dough. I mean, it depends on the pasta we're trying to achieve. Our standard dough that we use for most of our fresh pastas, like anything filled, or fettuccine or lasagna sheets, is a 3-to-1 double zero to durum ratio. Our standard recipe is actually 750 grams of double zero, 250 grams of durum, 38 to 40 egg yolks, and up to a cup of water. And that up to a cup depends on the weather outside. Depends on the season. When it's cold and dry, you know, you need a little bit more. When it's 90 degrees outside and it's humid, you need less. And then just a touch of olive oil. And I never really understood the olive oil part, but I'm not going to argue with it. So I just roll with it.
What's the shelf life on the pasta?
Shelf life on pasta. Something like this. This can hold in the freezer, I would say, about 3 days tops. And then all these little wings and everything, they're going to get too dried out and they're going to start to crack. And then you're going to cook them and they're going to just fall apart.
So you don't cover them, or you don't put it in a plastic?
Sheet tray, right in the freezer. Half an hour later, they're rock solid. Once they're hard or they're frozen, you can actually portion them into third pans or six pans or half pans, whatever your kind of your mise en place will allow you. You don't want to stack them too deep on each other, so we use the shallow third pans a lot of the time, and we'll just rotate them more.
What's the shelf life on the dough?
On the dough, I like dough within the first 2 days. One, it starts to oxidize. And one thing that I did notice in a couple places when I was over in Italy that I didn't really like, but I'm sure they have the reasons, is some of the places put a little citric acid in their dough. It prevents it from oxidizing, but I'm not sure exactly what it does chemically, but I try to keep things simple when we do it, so
you don't use it?
we don't use it. After about 3 or 4 days, you'll start to see speckles on the outside, and it starts to get gummy. All that gluten that you built up while making the dough, it starts to dissipate. You start to lose it. It starts to get gummy. You have to add more flour. It just throws off the whole chemistry of it. So we try to only make batches of dough that last no more than like 2.5, 3 days. Day 2 is actually the best. You make it on day 1, you come back the next day, it's like perfect. All the flour is hydrated. Everything's real elastic. It stretches beautifully. So like I said, all these little scrap pieces that we save, you don't want to re-roll these into a ravioli, because these little seams that you can't see, when you go to roll them out, they'll tear, and then it's not a good thing. So just start with a fresh piece of dough and save your scraps.
You said you guys always cook them right out of the freezer, you let them thaw out first?
No, freezer.
Right out of the freezer, yeah.
They have to go straight from the table into the freezer. If they sit and kind of sit even like refrigerated, they'll get gummy and they'll tear. They'll stick.
I'm saying you're going to pull them out and then you're going to roll them right from the freezer.
From the freezer right into the roll. Yep. That's the best way to maintain the shape. So, like I said before, like the more you roll out, you kind of get your own little characteristics, your own little way, and little tricks. For me, I found that the size of my hand at half an inch wide of the dough will give me approximately like 10 feet, about 12 inches wide of dough. Obviously for this table we're going to have to cut that back, so you want to go like the size of your hand, or my hand, a 1/4 inch thick. Another little trick that people think I'm crazy, but when I first pick up the dough, I like talk to it. I massage it, I feel it. What's the moisture like? What's the elasticity like? Is it going to need flour? Is it not going to need flour? Is it sticking to the table already? You know, stuff like that. You want to actually, making pasta is a very personal thing. You want to know what you're working with. So every time you pick it up, you want to actually feel it. You don't want to go right on the table and put the pin to it. Then you really don't know what you're working with. So make sure you pick it up. Kind of massage it into the shape that you want. You want to start with a rectangle, because as you roll through the machine, you'll have more control of it that way. The less times you can put it through the machine, the better, I think. The less times you're likely to tear it or rip it or get stuck in the machine. Are you ready? This dough is telling me that you are going to mess it up. That I need to protect it. So a little bit of flour to start. You want to start with more flour and finish with less. The thinner it gets, the more likely it is to dry out. So you kind of tap it into place, like a little hammer. Roll it into a rectangle. So you want to start wide, obviously, and progressively work your way down. Sometimes you don't need to adjust the actual width of the rollers that make it thinner and thicker. Sometimes you just need to apply more pressure. So when we get thinner and it looks like it's not going to get any thinner, all you got to do is put more pressure here, and stretch it manually. All right, you're up. So one crucial thing that I've done, and I'm sure anybody has done a bunch of times, is you finish one rollout and you go right into the next and you forget to change this, and your first rollout is through paper thin and you just tear your dough and it gets stuck around things. You have to clean out the machine. It's not pretty. So always try to remember to make it wide again before you start the roasting. Evan, so you?
Set wide.
Okay. If you're unsure, always look at the rollers. Use the back of your hand as opposed to your front. Because the back, one, it'll stay drier with a little flour, and two, all your little creases in your fingers are likely to tear the dough. So just use the back in your wrist and let it slide right off. Right? Back of your hand. It's a little tricky. Okay, one side through, In between every time you adjust the rollers, you want to feel the dough. If you feel it even a little bit tacky on your hands, you want to apply a little bit of flour.
Is that AP or is that a finer?
This feels like it's a 00,
Yeah, I was gonna say
which is an
pretty
Italian,
fine.
which is a fancy way of saying Italian elbows. It's a mix of flours, and the funny thing is, from what I learned from actually, I had an Italian chef in culinary school. The majority of Italian flour comes from America. It's grown in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Canada. Then they ship it over there and they process it. Exactly. So we adjust it a little bit down.
It's the blending.
Right.
We line this up. Look, dude, I thought you were doing this. So, a lot of you probably don't know this, but this guy used to be an extern for us, so I like giving him a hard time. I'm not normally this pushy. So you want to flour both sides. What I like to do, and I get in trouble for this still, is I take it and I fire it that way, and it just makes a nice sheen. However, the office door is right next to the pasta table, so there's just like a pile of flour right in front of the office door. So I kind of get jumped for that sometimes. Right. So you want to adjust it, move it down a tiny bit. And if you're unsure of like the numbers, because these numbers are just a guide, always look at the rollers and always feel the dough. Right? So once you get it a little longer, you can like take it a little bit and shimmy it up this way to make it a little bit more manageable. Right? Pick it up in the back of your hand, like this. Yep. This. Pick up this side like this. Put it back down this side. And when you have a pasta filling that's like the highlight, I try to keep it simple. Like, you know, it's all about the pasta. The sauce is there to dress the pasta. So all we're going to dress these raviolis in, all we're going to dress these dough in is a little butter sauce with parsley and black pepper. That's it. Finish with a little Parmesan cheese.